where heads of state, sports, entertainment, and political celebrities meet. You're listening to Armstrong Williams.
You mentioned that 5 medical doctors were original signers of the Declaration of Independence, and you made a case in your address at the National Prayer Breakfast that we need to return to that you have a voice just like many other physicians that can contribute to the progress of this nation.
Right. Physicians and many scientists are the most educated people in our society. Many, many years of schooling. A lot of that schooling emphasizes learning how to use empirical data, things that are observed, things that are known, and to use those to draw logical conclusions. And there is no reason that has to be confined to the scientific realm. That also works extraordinarily well when you're looking at social issues, when you're looking at political issues, economic issues. All of these things, work better if you apply logic to them, if you look at empirical information, you look at things that have happened in the past and what they lead to, rather than, straining everything through some type of ideological, philosophical strainer, which severely limits logic.
Dr. Carson, obviously you are well educated. You're a family man. You have 3 sons, my 3 sons, and they're all married. They're married the same year. Your wife, Candy, who you mentioned, co-wrote the book, America the Beautiful, also a graduate of Yale. Could you speak about the family life a little?
Yeah, well, obviously we're very proud of all 3 sons. One's an engineer, one's a financial manager, and one's an accountant. And they're all doing very well. And I'm a grandfather now as well. Now that the kids are grown up, my wife travels with me. I do a lot of traveling. She helped write the book. But I felt, as the kids were growing up, that it was very important that they know their father. And I was extraordinarily busy, so they probably wouldn't have if I hadn't done one thing. What I did is I had my office manager write my family into my schedule a year ahead of time. This weekend is family time. This week is family time. We're taking vacation here. Plus, I took them with me, all my speaking engagements, and I was speaking a lot all over the world. And I insisted that my family come along as part of the price. And so they have frequent flyer cards for all airlines, and they've been all over the world. And it's been a great education for them, as well as excellent family bonding time.
You may not have realized this, but obviously in the blogosphere, from Drudge Report to Limbaugh and others are saying that it's as if you launched a political career. And look, and you and I are definitely like brothers. You're one of my closest friends in the world, and then people know that for the sake of this full disclosure. But one thing I do know is that you have no interest in politics, and you don't have political aspirations. But I want to raise this to give you a chance to address it instead of allowing others to try to put words in your mouth. Is there ever a remote possibility that you would consider politics?
Well, I never rule anything out because, my life is guided by God. And I've always said I have no interest in politics, but if God grabs me by the collar and sticks me there, I certainly will do His will. And I just kind of leave it at that.
What can we do about what role should the government play in our lives in terms of the welfare, aid for dependent children, and what role should we play? And should it be a limited role for government? And what are the consequences of government playing too big of a role in our lives?
Well, again, if you're a student of history, there were many societies that started out saying, the government will be here just for, these purposes, and, people are pretty much on their own. And virtually in all cases, the government just continues to grow and to grow and to become more aggressive, and pretty soon people lose their rights, and pretty soon you have tyranny. That's the natural course of things. The people who framed our Constitution tried to frame it in such a way that would not happen. And while we were respectful of the Constitution, it did not happen. But now there are many people who think maybe the Constitution is a little outdated, and that's the precursor for allowing the same thing that has happened to other societies to happen to us. And, those of us who understand this must be vigilant and must be outspoken and not allow the Constitution to be ignored.
Dr. Carson, finally, one of the things that you talked about, you hinted about lawyers, you hinted about the bald eagle having a left wing and a right wing, and even in your parable about the lighthouse, it could also, if you think about it deeply, you could think about the gridlock and how people need to compromise and come together for the good of we the people.
Absolutely. No one group or party has a monopoly on wisdom or good ideals, or a monopoly on bad ideals. But the key, just like in a marriage, is communication. You have to be able to talk to each other. You have to be able to discuss the rationale behind your ideals and the pros and the cons. And you have to be able to understand what are the goals that unite us so that you can figure out when, in fact, you are getting to that goal. When are you approaching that goal? When have you arrived at that goal? And those are things that frequently are not known because people are driven by ideology or people are driven by special interest groups who really have only one goal, and that's whatever their self-interest is. Those things are not compatible with good political leadership.
Dr. Carson, could you help us sort of understand for those look, you made it. One of the things that was very interested in your remarks before the National Prayer Breakfast yesterday was that the wealthy should not be punished, that they make a contribution, and they should be role models and not maligned, and we should not create this resentment against achievement in our nation.
Yeah, well, if you look back at the history of our nation, and go back to the industrial age, Vanderbilt and Rockefeller, Carnegie Mellon, Ford, Kellogg, all of these people, incredibly wealthy. And the Europeans thought it was unfair that you could have people that wealthy and then have poor people. But they didn't understand the mentality of wealthy people in our country, which was different than the mentality of wealthy people in Europe who hoarded money, passed it down from generation to generation. All of those people I just named in our country used their money to build this nation up, to put in a transcontinental railroad, to build all kinds of factories, textile mills, things that employed people, that allowed people to move from the lower rungs into the middle class, created the strongest middle class in the history of the world. They went on and donated for universities and for libraries and for museums. They created foundations to help the poor. They created medical organizations. That's the history of America. And I think, the only thing that class warfare will do is to dry up the spigots of people who previously were very generous. This is not what we want to do. This is the last place on earth that we should have class warfare. And certainly, to continue to squeeze and to punish those people who are frequently very creative. And because of their creativity, they've been rewarded financially. And, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with them wanting to create even more wealth for themselves. In the process of doing that, they frequently create a lot more jobs. And, when we declare war on them, we're declaring war on jobs. And you don't have to be a genius to see that that's why we're not getting out of this situation.
And finally, it's okay to say Merry Christmas, Happy Easter. There's nothing wrong with it, is it?
Absolutely not. And, it doesn't matter, what religion a person is from. When somebody wishes them well in any language and for any occasion, that's a good thing. That's a thing to be celebrated. That's not something to get offended about. And, it kind of reminds me of the situation a few weeks ago where one of the sports commentators commented about the girlfriend, quarterback from the University of Alabama, and said, "Oh, what a beautiful..."
Brent Musburger.
And people started, the blogs, and that there was something wrong with that. And then finally, after analyzing, I said, I guess there's nothing wrong with that. But they just felt there must be something politically incorrect about that. He can't be talking about how beautiful this woman is. I mean, this is how absurd we become.
Dr. Carson, obviously, your intellect, I will tell you this, is just superior. It was obviously on display during your speech, and you are a pediatric neurosurgeon. I mean, you've saved lives. You're known as one of the world's most famous neurosurgeons, and so it is obvious to you that you've concluded that God has blessed you in your family life and those that you've touched. And so in gratitude, you want God to continue to show mercy and grace on your life. And so when you say that Jesus is your role model and that you serve God, obviously, if someone looks at your life, it had to be the hands of God, sort of playing on the book that you wrote, one of your bestsellers, Gifted Hands.
Oh, no question about it. And God orchestrated my life. He gave me, one once-in-a-lifetime case after another to rapidly propel me, to a stage where I did have the ability to influence others.
Dr. Carson, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for that wonderful prep breakfast, and we wish you well in all your endeavors.
Thank you very much.